The massive ships came without warning on a Tuesday morning in late September. They blocked out the sun over 3 continents, casting shadows so large that people on the ground thought a storm was coming. But this was no storm. This was something far worse. Commander Xyrith stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the blue and green planet below. His 4 eyes blinked slowly as he studied the information on his display screen. The Velthari Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds across the galaxy, and Earth would be just another easy victory. He was certain of this. "What do we know about their weapons?" Xyrith asked his science officer, a thin creature named Torvax who specialized in analyzing enemy technology. Torvax made a sound that was almost like laughter. "They use chemical explosions to push metal projectiles through tubes, Commander. It is remarkably primitive. Our personal shields were designed to stop plasma bursts and particle beams. These human weapons will feel like rain against glass." Xyrith clicked his mandibles together in satisfaction. The Velthari were tall beings, standing over 8 feet in height, with hard exoskeletons and 4 arms. They had ruled their section of the galaxy for thousands of years. They had never lost a war. "Begin the landing," Xyrith ordered. "I want full control of this planet within 1 rotation of their moon." Down on Earth, the world was falling into chaos. Military bases scrambled their forces. Governments tried to communicate with the alien ships but received no response. And in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, a small team of soldiers watched the first alien dropships descend from the sky. Sergeant Jake Morrison had served in the United States Army for 15 years. He was a sniper, one of the best in his unit, trained to hit targets from distances that most people could not even see. He was 42 years old, with gray starting to show in his short brown hair. His face was weathered from years of service in harsh conditions around the world. Beside him lay Corporal Katie Vance, his spotter. She was younger, only 28. But she had sharp eyes and a sharper mind. Her job was to calculate wind speed, distance, and other factors that would affect a bullet's path. Together, they made a perfect team. "You seeing this?" Katie whispered, pressing her eye to her spotting scope. Jake watched through his rifle scope as the alien dropship landed in the valley below. The door opened, and the Velthari soldiers marched out in perfect formation. They were huge, their bodies covered in armor that seemed to shimmer with some kind of energy field. Even from this distance, Jake could see that these were not creatures that feared anything. "I see it," Jake replied quietly. "Count them. 24 soldiers, 3 vehicles, and something that looks like a command unit in the back." They stayed hidden in the rocks and watched as the aliens set up a temporary base with incredible speed. The Velthari moved with military precision, each one knowing exactly what to do. Within an hour, they had established a fortified position that would have taken human soldiers an entire day to build. Jake's radio crackled. The voice on the other end belonged to Captain Rodriguez, their commanding officer who was positioned 10 miles to the east. "All units, be advised. Engagement with enemy forces has begun in multiple locations. Conventional weapons are ineffective. I repeat, conventional weapons are ineffective. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary." Katie looked at Jake with worry in her eyes. "Ineffective? What does that mean?" As if to answer her question, they heard the sound of gunfire from the valley below. A group of soldiers from another unit had apparently decided to attack the alien base. Jake watched through his scope as bullets flew toward the Velthari soldiers. And then, he saw something that made his stomach turn cold. The bullets hit the alien's armor and simply stopped. The energy field around each soldier flickered blue for a moment, and the bullets fell to the ground like dead insects. The Velthari did not even slow down. They raised their own weapons, which glowed with orange light, and fired back. The human soldiers did not stand a chance. In less than 30 seconds, the entire squad was dead. The aliens did not even bother to check the bodies. They simply continued with their work as if nothing had happened. "My God," Katie breathed. They killed them all." Jake said nothing. His mind was racing, analyzing what he had just seen. The bullets had not penetrated the shields. Not even the heavy caliber rounds from the machine guns had gotten through. This was bad. This was very bad. Over the next few hours, similar reports came in from around the world. Tank shells bounced off alien armor. Missiles exploded against their shields without causing damage. Even artillery strikes, which could level entire buildings, did nothing against the Velthari forces. Humanity was losing. And they were losing fast. By nightfall, the aliens had established major bases on every continent. Cities that had resisted were burning. Governments were either surrendering or going into hiding. The Velthari broadcast a simple message in every human language: submit or die. Jake and Katie remained hidden in the mountains. They had watched the aliens all day, studying their movements, their behavior, their equipment. Jake had filled an entire notebook with observations. "We need to retreat," Katie said. "Link up with whatever forces are left. Find somewhere safe." But Jake shook his head slowly. He was still watching the aliens through his scope, his eyes focused on something that most people would have missed. "Look at their shields," he said. "Watch carefully when they move." Katie adjusted her spotting scope and watched. At first, she did not see anything unusual. But then one of the aliens turned quickly to respond to an order. And she caught it. The energy field flickered. For just a fraction of a second, there was a gap. The shield has a delay, she realized. When they move fast, it takes a moment to catch up. Jake nodded. "And look at their officers. See those things on the back of their necks? Those insignias or whatever they are? The shields are thinner there. They are protecting their whole body, but that spot is weaker." Katie stared at him. "Jake, even if you are right, we are talking about hitting a target the size of a coin from over a mile away, through a gap that exists for half a second." Jake finally looked away from his scope and met her eyes. His expression was calm, almost peaceful. "Then I better not miss." That night, as fires burned across the earth and humanity faced extinction, two soldiers began planning something that no alien had ever anticipated. They were not going to fight a war. They were going to hunt. 3 weeks had passed since the invasion began, and the world Jake Morrison knew was gone. Major cities lay in ruins. Organized military resistance had collapsed in most regions. The Velthari had established their rule with brutal efficiency, treating humans like insects that needed to be controlled. But in the mountains and forests and forgotten places of the earth, small groups of survivors refused to give up. They called themselves the Resistance. Though they had no central command and no real plan, they simply refused to accept that humanity's story was over. Jake and Katie had traveled north through the wilderness, avoiding alien patrols and surveillance drones that swept the skies day and night. They moved only in darkness, hiding during the day in caves and abandoned buildings. It was slow, exhausting work, but it kept them alive. On the 18th day, they finally reached their destination: a hidden bunker built into the side of a mountain in Wyoming. Before the invasion, it had been a secret government facility. Now it served as one of the last gathering points for what remained of America's military leadership. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Grant met them at the entrance. He was a large man in his 50s, with a shaved head and tired eyes that had seen too much death in recent weeks. He shook Jake's hand firmly. "Sergeant Morrison, I have heard good things about you. They say you are the best shot in the entire Western region." "I do my job, sir," Jake replied simply. Marcus led them deep into the bunker, through corridors filled with soldiers, scientists, and civilians who had managed to escape the alien occupation. The air was thick with tension and fear, but also with something else: determination. They entered a large room that had been converted into a laboratory. Equipment and computers lined the walls, and in the center of the room stood a woman in her 30s with black hair tied back in a practical ponytail. She was examining a piece of alien armor under a powerful microscope. "This is Dr. Lisa Huang," Marcus explained. "She is our best physicist. Lisa, this is the sniper I told you about." Lisa looked up and studied Jake with intelligent eyes. "Good. I have been waiting for someone who can actually hit what they aim at." She gestured for them to come closer. "Let me show you what we have learned." On a large screen, she displayed a diagram of the Velthari energy shield. It looked like a bubble of light surrounding a figure. Their personal shields are incredibly advanced, Lisa began. They can stop plasma, lasers, explosive force, and high-velocity projectiles. Our bullets travel at around 2,000 feet per second. The shield detects anything moving faster than 500 feet per second and creates a counterforce to stop it. Katie frowned. So even if we shoot them, the shield knows the bullet is coming and stops it? Exactly. But here is the interesting part. Lisa changed the image to show a slow-moving object passing through the shield. The shield is designed to stop threats. It calculates whether something is dangerous based on its speed and energy. A fast-moving bullet registers as a threat, but something moving slowly? The shield ignores it completely. Jake leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the screen. You are saying a slow bullet could get through? Not exactly. A bullet that is too slow will not do any damage anyway. What we need is something in between. A projectile that moves just under the shield's detection threshold, but still carries enough force to penetrate their armor. Lisa pulled out a small metal object that looked like a bullet, but was slightly different in shape. I have been working on this. Tungsten core, modified propellant, designed to travel at exactly 480 feet per second. Slow enough to slip past the shield, fast enough to kill. Marcus crossed his arms. The problem is accuracy. At that speed, the bullet drops significantly over distance. Wind affects it more. Everything becomes harder. That is why you need someone special, Lisa said, looking directly at Jake. Someone who can compensate for all those factors and still hit a target the size of a small coin from extreme range. Jake picked up the special bullet and examined it carefully. It was heavier than a normal round, and the shape was designed to maintain stability despite the slower speed. He understood immediately what Lisa was trying to do. The weak spot on their neck, he said. The place where the shield is thinnest. If I can hit that with one of these rounds, you could kill a Velthari soldier that everyone else thinks is invincible, Lisa finished. Katie had been quiet, running calculations in her head. The shot would be incredibly difficult. At 2,000 meters, with a subsonic round, we are talking about a flight time of nearly 4 seconds. The bullet will drop over 30 feet. Wind drift could push it several feet in any direction, and the target area is maybe 2 inches wide. Can it be done? Marcus asked. Everyone looked at Jake. He was still holding the bullet, turning it over in his fingers. His face showed no expression, but his mind was working through the problem. Range, wind, elevation, humidity, temperature, 1,000 variables that could mean the difference between a kill and a miss. I will need to practice, he said finally. A lot of practice. And I will need the best spotter in the world. He looked at Katie. Fortunately, I already have her. Over the next 2 weeks, Jake and Katie trained harder than they had ever trained before. Lisa made dozens of the special rounds, and Jake fired them again and again, learning how they flew, how they dropped, how they reacted to different conditions. He missed more than he hit at first. But slowly, his accuracy improved. Meanwhile, the Resistance gathered intelligence on Velthari movements. They learned that High Commander Zyrith himself would be visiting a regional command center in Nevada to inspect his forces. It would be the first time such a high-value target had been exposed since the invasion began. On the night before the mission, Jake sat alone cleaning his rifle. Marcus found him there and sat down beside him. You know this is a one-way trip, Marcus said quietly. Even if you make the shot, the aliens will hunt you down. Jake nodded slowly. I know. Then why do it? Jake looked up at the ceiling of the bunker, thinking about all the people who had died in the past weeks. Friends, family, innocent people who had done nothing wrong. The world he had known was gone. But that did not mean there was nothing left worth fighting for. Because someone has to show them that we are not helpless, he said. Someone has to prove that their shields can be broken. Even if I die tomorrow, the next sniper will know it is possible. And the one after that, and the one after that. We cannot win a fair fight against them. But we do not have to fight fair. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he stood and put a hand on Jake's shoulder. Make it count, Sergeant. Jake looked down at his rifle. the weapon that had served him faithfully for years. Tomorrow, it would either change history or become just another tool of a failed resistance. Either way, he was ready. I intend to, sir. The Nevada desert stretched out beneath them like a sea of brown and orange. Jake Morrison lay perfectly still on a rocky ridge, his body pressed against the warm stone, his eye looking through the scope of his rifle. He had been in this position for 6 hours, barely moving, barely breathing. His muscles ached, but he ignored the pain. He had endured worse. Beside him, Katie Vance watched through her spotting scope, her notebook filled with numbers and calculations. Behind them, 2 other soldiers kept watch. Private Danny Cole, a young man from Texas who had joined the resistance after his entire family was killed, and Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, a communications expert who maintained their link to the outside world. It had taken them 2 weeks to reach this position. They had traveled at night, crawling through drainage tunnels and hiding in abandoned mines. 3 times they had nearly been discovered by Velthari patrols, but they had made it. Now all that mattered was the shot. Below them, approximately 2,300 meters away, sat the regional command center of the Velthari occupation force. It was a massive structure of alien metal and glowing energy, surrounded by hundreds of soldiers and dozens of vehicles. At the center of it all stood High Commander Zyrith himself, inspecting his troops with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. Jake studied the alien commander through his scope. Zyrith was taller than the other Velthari, his armor decorated with symbols that indicated his rank and achievements. He moved slowly, deliberately, stopping to speak with officers and examine equipment. He had no idea that death was watching him from the ridge above. Wind is steady at 4 miles per hour from the northeast, Katie whispered, her voice barely audible. Humidity is 12%. Temperature is 87 degrees. Barometric pressure is stable. Jake made tiny adjustments to his aim, accounting for each factor. The special bullet in his rifle would travel for nearly 4 seconds before reaching its target. In that time, it would drop over 30 feet and drift several feet to the side. He had to aim at a spot in the empty sky and trust that the bullet would find its mark. Range confirmed at 2,340 meters, Katie continued. Target is stationary. Recommend hold point 2.5 mils high, 1.8 mils left. Jake adjusted his aim accordingly. The crosshairs of his scope now pointed at nothing but air, high above and to the left of Zyreth's position. To anyone watching, it would look like he was aiming at the clouds. His finger rested lightly on the trigger. His heartbeat slowed to a calm, steady rhythm. This was what he had trained for his entire life. Not this exact moment, perhaps, but moments like it. The entire world narrowed down to a single point of focus. Take the shot when ready, Katie said. Jake took one final breath. He felt the weight of the rifle against his shoulder, the texture of the trigger against his finger, the slight breeze against his cheek. He thought about everyone who had died since the invasion began. He thought about the future of humanity resting on this single moment. Then he stopped thinking entirely. There was only the shot. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against his shoulder with a sound that was softer than normal. The subsonic round leaving the barrel without the usual crack of a bullet breaking the sound barrier. Jake kept his eye to the scope, tracking the invisible path of the bullet as it arced through the air. 1 second. The bullet climbed higher, carried by its initial momentum, fighting against gravity that wanted to pull it down. 2 seconds. It reached the peak of its arc and began to fall, still moving forward, still on course. The wind pushed against it gently, but Jake had calculated for this. 3 seconds. The bullet descended toward the command center, invisible and silent. A tiny piece of metal, carrying the hopes of an entire species. 4 seconds. In the scope, Jake saw Zyrith turn slightly to address an officer beside him. For a terrible instant, he thought the movement would cause the shot to miss. But the alien commander turned back just in time. The bullet passed through the energy shield, as if it was not there. The shield flickered with confusion, its sensors unable to process the slow-moving projectile. And then, the tungsten core struck the exposed patch at the base of Zyrith's skull and punched through his brain. The High Commander of the Velthari invasion force collapsed without a sound. For a moment, nothing happened. The aliens around Xyreth did not understand what they had just witnessed. There had been no flash of light, no explosion, no visible weapon discharge. Their commander had simply fallen over. Perhaps he had tripped. Perhaps he was ill. Then one of the officers knelt beside the body and saw the hole in the back of Xyreth's head. He let out a sound that Jake would remember for the rest of his life. A high-pitched scream of pure terror. It was the sound of a being confronting something impossible. Chaos erupted below. Soldiers ran in every direction, their weapons raised, searching for an enemy they could not find. Officers shouted orders that no one followed. The perfect discipline of the Velthari army shattered like glass. "Target down," Katie breathed, her voice shaking with disbelief. "Oh my God, Jake! Target is down! You actually did it!" Jake did not celebrate. He was already packing up his equipment, preparing to move. The aliens would search for them soon, and they needed to be far away before that happened. "Time to go," he said quietly. They slipped away from the ridge as the sun began to set, leaving behind a scene of confusion and fear. The Velthari would spend days searching for the killer, using every piece of advanced technology at their disposal. They would find nothing. How could they? They were looking for an energy weapon, a missile, something that fit their understanding of warfare. They never considered that death had come from a simple piece of metal, launched by a chemical explosion, guided by human eyes and human patience. News of Xyreth's death spread quickly, both among the aliens and among the human resistance. The Velthari tried to hide what had happened, but rumors travel fast. Within a week, every resistance cell on the planet knew the truth. The invincible aliens could be killed. Their shields could be beaten. There was hope. Maria Santos transmitted a coded message to Resistance headquarters as they traveled through the desert darkness. It contained only 3 words: Ghost Killer. Successful. In the bunker in Wyoming, Dr. Lisa Huang received the message and allowed herself a small smile. Then she turned back to her workbench, where dozens more special bullets waited to be completed. The war was far from over. But for the first time since the invasion began, humanity was fighting back, and the galaxy would never forget what a single sniper and a piece of metal could accomplish. Sub-Commander Valeth stood in the chamber where High Commander Xyreth had died 3 weeks ago. The body had been removed, but she could still see the spot where he had fallen. The greatest military leader of the Velthari Dominion, killed by an enemy that no one had seen. She was shorter than most Velthari, but her reputation for cruelty made up for her size. She had taken command of the Earth invasion after Xyreth's death, and her first order had been to execute 1,000 human prisoners in revenge. It had not made her feel better. "Report," she demanded, turning to face her gathered officers. Chief Science Officer Torvax stepped forward nervously. He had been studying the strange death for weeks, and he still did not fully understand what had happened. "We have analyzed the wound on the High Commander's body," Torvax began. "It was caused by a small metal projectile, similar to the primitive weapons the humans use. But this one was different. It moved slowly, too slowly for our shields to recognize as a threat. It simply passed through as if the shield was not there." Valeth's eyes narrowed. "Are you telling me that our shields, which can stop plasma cannons and particle beams, were defeated by a slow bullet?" "Yes, Sub-Commander. The humans have found a gap in our defenses that we never anticipated. They have turned our own technology against us." Before Valeth could respond, another officer rushed into the room. His name was Captain Kreth, and his face showed pure terror. "Sub-Commander, we have received reports of another attack. Regional Commander Gorthax was killed this morning in the European sector. Same method. Small projectile. Passed through his shield. Struck him in the head." Valeth felt something cold settle in her stomach. 2 commanders killed by the same mysterious weapon. This was no longer a single incident. This was a pattern. Over the following months, the pattern continued. Velthari officers died across the planet. struck down by invisible weapons wielded by enemies who vanished like smoke. The humans called them snipers. The Velthari called them ghost killers. Jake Morrison became a legend among the resistance, though few knew his real name. After killing Xyrith, he and his team had trained dozens of other snipers in the new technique. Dr. Lisa Huang's special bullets were manufactured in hidden workshops across the world and distributed through underground networks. In Texas, Gunnery Sergeant Ben Carter killed 3 Velthari officers in a single week. He was a former Marine sniper who had lost his wife and son in the initial invasion. Every shot he fired was filled with grief and rage, and his aim never wavered. In Virginia, Staff Sergeant Nicole Webb became known as the most patient hunter in the resistance. She once waited in a single position for 11 days, surviving on water and protein bars, until her target finally appeared. The shot was perfect. The Velthari officer never knew what killed him. In Oregon, a teenager named Tommy Park, who had learned to shoot from his grandfather before the invasion, killed his first alien at the age of 17. He would go on to kill 14 more before the war ended. The Velthari tried everything to stop the ghost killers. They increased patrols. They built detection systems designed to find humans hiding at long range. They modified their shields to try to catch the slow projectiles. Nothing worked. Every time the aliens adapted, the humans adapted faster. When the Velthari built sensors to detect metal, the snipers started using ceramic bullets. When the aliens modified their shields to catch slower objects, Dr. Huang changed the bullet design to slip through the new settings. It was a constant battle of technology and creativity, and the humans were winning. "How is this possible?" Valeth screamed at her officers during one particularly bad meeting. 7 more commanders had died that week, and morale among the Velthari forces was collapsing. Soldiers were afraid to stand still for too long. Officers refused to leave their fortified bunkers. The mighty Velthari army was becoming paralyzed by fear. Torvax tried to explain. "The humans have practiced this form of warfare for thousands of years, Sub-Commander. They call it sniping. It is the art of killing from a distance without being seen. They have developed it to a level that we never imagined possible. We have conquered species that built starships while these creatures were still living in caves," Valeth hissed. "How can they be defeating us with metal and chemicals? Because they are patient," Torvax said quietly. "They are willing to wait for days, weeks, even months for a single shot. They train for years to master the skill. They treat killing as an art form, a tradition passed from teacher to student across generations. We have never faced anything like them." Valeth dismissed her officers and sat alone in the dark chamber. For the first time in her long military career, she felt genuine fear. Not fear of death, but fear of something worse. Fear of losing. The Velthari Dominion had never lost a war. They had conquered hundreds of worlds with ease. They had faced enemies with superior numbers, superior technology, even superior individual strength, but they had never faced enemies like humans. Enemies who turned weakness into strength, who found holes in defenses that should have had no holes, who refused to surrender even when defeat seemed certain. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison continued his work in the shadows. He rarely fired shots himself anymore, instead focusing on training new snipers and planning missions. But his legend grew with every dead Velthari officer, every failed alien operation, every small victory won by a single bullet. One night, Katie Vance found him sitting alone on a hilltop, looking up at the stars. His face was tired, lined with the stress of 2 years of constant warfare. "You okay?" she asked, sitting beside him. Jake was silent for a moment. "I used to look at those stars and wonder what was out there," he said finally. "Now I know. And I wish I did not. We are winning, Jake. For the first time since this started, we are actually winning." He shook his head slowly. "We are not winning. We are just making them bleed. Making them pay for every inch of our planet. But until we can actually push them off Earth, we are just buying time." Katie put her hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes, buying time is enough. Time for people to hope. Time for other nations to fight back." Time for the next generation of soldiers to grow up and join the resistance. She paused. You started something, Jake. A single shot that proved the aliens could be killed. That shot gave people hope, and hope is the most dangerous weapon of all. Jake looked at her, and for the first time in months, something like a smile crossed his face. Then let us give them some more hope. The next morning, he began planning the most ambitious mission of the war so far, the assassination of Sub-Commander Valith herself. The war for Earth lasted 3 more years after Jake Morrison killed High Commander Xyrith. It was a brutal, bloody conflict that cost millions of lives on both sides. But slowly, impossibly, humanity began to win. The snipers were not the only reason for this victory. Resistance fighters sabotaged alien supply lines. Scientists developed new weapons based on captured Velthari technology. Ordinary people performed extraordinary acts of courage every single day. But it was the ghost killers who broke the enemy's spirit. Every dead officer reminded the aliens that they were not safe anywhere. Every perfect shot proved that human patience and skill could defeat alien technology. Jake Morrison trained hundreds of snipers during those years. He developed new techniques, designed new equipment, and planned dozens of successful missions. But he also paid a terrible price. His body was failing from years of sleeping on cold ground and eating whatever food he could find. His hands, which had once been perfectly steady, now sometimes trembled when he held his rifle. In the spring of the 4th year of the war, the resistance launched a massive assault on the city of Denver, which had become the Velthari's main base of operations in North America. It was the largest human offensive since the invasion began, involving thousands of soldiers and dozens of sniper teams. Jake led his team through the ruins of the city, moving toward a position that would give them a clear shot at the enemy command center. Katie was beside him, as she had been since the beginning. Danny Cole and Maria Santos followed close behind. They were 2 blocks from their destination when the Velthari patrol found them. The firefight was short and violent. Jake took down 3 alien soldiers with his pistol before a plasma bolt struck him in the chest. The pain was incredible. Like being burned and frozen at the same time. He fell against a broken wall, blood spreading across his uniform. Katie screamed his name and returned fire, killing the remaining aliens. Then she was at his side, pressing her hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Hold on," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Hold on, Jake. We will get you to a medic." But Jake knew the truth. He had seen enough wounds in his life to know which ones could be survived and which ones could not. He reached up and took Katie's hand. "Take my rifle," he said, his voice weak. "Finish the mission. I am not leaving you. That is an order, Corporal." He managed a small smile. "You are the best spotter I ever had. Now it is time for you to be the best shooter." Katie's hands were shaking as she picked up Jake's rifle. It was the same weapon he had used to kill Xyrith all those years ago, worn smooth by thousands of shots. It felt heavy in her hands, heavy with history and responsibility. "I do not know if I can do this without you," she whispered. "You already know everything I know," Jake replied. "I have watched you grow from a nervous corporal into the finest sniper I have ever seen. You do not need me anymore." He coughed, and blood appeared on his lips. "Promise me something. Anything. Win this war, and when you do, teach someone else. Pass on everything we learned. Make sure they never forget what a single shooter can accomplish," Katie promised. And then Jake Morrison, the man who had taken the shot that changed the world, closed his eyes and let go. The resistance won the Battle of Denver 3 days later. Katie Vance, carrying Jake's rifle, made the shot that killed Sub-Commander Valith herself. It was from a distance of 2,700 meters, through high winds and driving rain, hitting a target that was barely visible. It was the most difficult shot of the entire war. When Valith fell, the remaining Velthari forces began to retreat. They fought their way back to their ships and fled Earth's orbit, leaving behind their bases, their equipment, and their dreams of conquest. Before they left, they broadcast a message to the rest of the Dominion. "Do not return to this world. The humans are more dangerous than we knew." The war was over. Humanity had won. In the years that followed, Earth rebuilt, cities rose from the ashes, governments reformed, and using captured Velthari technology, humans began to build their own starships. Within 2 decades, they had joined the galactic community. The other species of the galaxy regarded humans with a mixture of curiosity and fear. These were the people who had defeated the Velthari Dominion, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in known space. They had done it not with superior technology or greater numbers, but with patience, precision, and the ancient art of the sniper. Katie Vance lived to see humanity reach the stars. She spent her final years teaching at a military academy, training a new generation of snipers who would protect Earth from any future threats. Jake's rifle hung on the wall behind her desk, a reminder of everything they had sacrificed. The story of the war became legend. Children grew up hearing about Jake Morrison, the man who took the impossible shot. They learned about Katie Vance, who carried on his legacy. They studied the techniques developed by Dr. Lisa Huang and the sacrifices made by countless unknown heroes. 20 years after the war ended, Ambassador Chris Palmer stood before the Galactic Council. He was a young man, born after the invasion. But he had grown up on stories of the resistance. Now he represented humanity on the largest stage in the galaxy. The council chamber was vast, filled with representatives from hundreds of species. Some were ancient civilizations that had mastered technologies humans could barely imagine. Others were newcomers like humanity, still finding their place in the galaxy. All of them watched as Palmer took his place at the speaking platform. "You want to know why you should respect humanity?" he said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I will tell you. For 10,000 years, we practiced killing each other from a distance. We made it an art. We made it a science. We turned it into a tradition passed from generation to generation. Other species built weapons of incredible power. We built patience. We built precision. We built the ability to wait for days, weeks, even months for a single perfect moment." He paused, looking around at the assembled aliens. "Your technology made you powerful. Our patience made us deadly." The Velthari learned this lesson the hard way. Their shields could stop plasma and particle beams, but they could not stop a human with a rifle and the will to wait. Never forget the difference. The council was silent. Some of the older species nodded in understanding. They had heard stories of the war, of the ghost killers who had haunted the Velthari forces. They knew better than to underestimate the seemingly primitive species from the small blue planet. Somewhere in the stars, aboard the distant ships of the retreating Velthari remnant, officers still looked over their shoulders when they walked in the open. They still felt fear when they stood still for too long. They had learned a lesson that they would never forget. The galaxy had many wonders. Ancient civilizations, powerful technologies, vast empires spanning thousands of worlds. But there was only one species that had perfected the art of the long rifle. Only one species that could reach out across impossible distances and deliver death with a single shot, and the galaxy would never forget them.